Long before modern botany classified plants into families, genera, and species, ancient Indian scholars had already begun organizing the plant world into structured systems. They observed growth patterns. They studied root structures. They documented soil preferences. They tracked seasonal flowering cycles. And they recorded these observations in texts known collectively as Vrikshayurveda, the science of plant life. The word vriksha means tree. Ayurveda means knowledge of life. Together, Vrikshayurveda represents a systematic approach to plant health, cultivation, classification, and ecological integration. One of the most important surviving texts in this tradition is attributed to Surapala, composed around the 10th century. This text does not read like mythology. It reads like agricultural botany. Plants are categorized based on visible morphology. Some are classified by trunk structure, trees with strong woody stems. Others are categorized as shrubs or creepers based on growth habit. Climbers are distinguished from ground-spreading plants. This reflects early morphological taxonomy. Modern botany also begins classification through observable characteristics, stem type, leaf arrangement, reproductive structure. Ancient scholars did not possess microscopes, but they relied on careful macroscopic observation. The Vrikshayurveda also categorizes plants based on fruiting behavior. Some plants bear fruit annually. Others require multiple years. Some regenerate after cutting. Others perish permanently. This practical classification influenced agricultural planning. Understanding plant life cycles allowed better crop rotation and orchard management. The text describes soil types suitable for different plants. Sandy soil supports certain species. Clay-rich soil supports others. Dark loamy soil enhances fruit-bearing trees. Modern agronomy confirms that soil texture and pH determine nutrient absorption. The Vrikshayurveda instructs farmers to test soil by touch, color, and smell. Soil that crumbles easily indicates aeration. Soil that smells rich indicates organic vitality. Soil that retains excessive water may require drainage. These diagnostic methods resemble modern soil assessment principles, albeit without laboratory instrumentation. Another striking feature is plant disease diagnosis. The text describes symptoms such as leaf discoloration, stunted growth, and abnormal fruit development. Remedies include organic treatments prepared from herbal mixtures, cow urine, milk, and plant extracts. While some prescriptions reflect pre-scientific assumptions, others align with natural pest control and nutrient supplementation practices. The classification system also considers medicinal properties. Plants are grouped based on therapeutic use. This overlaps with Ayurvedic pharmacology. Botanical knowledge was not separate from medicine. Understanding plant properties required taxonomic clarity. Some passages classify plants by internal qualities, hot, cooling, dry, or moist in nature. These categories correspond loosely to phytochemical effects observed empirically. The Vrikshayurveda also outlines propagation techniques. Cutting, grafting, and seed sowing methods are described. Grafting in particular demonstrates advanced horticultural understanding. By joining compatible plant tissues, farmers could improve fruit yield or resilience. This technique requires knowledge of vascular compatibility and timing. Modern horticulture uses similar principles. Irrigation recommendations appear throughout the text. Young plants require frequent watering. Mature trees require controlled intervals. Overwatering is discouraged. These observations reflect understanding of root oxygen requirements. Plants require both moisture and air. The Vrikshayurveda even discusses spacing between trees. Overcrowding reduces sunlight exposure and nutrient competition. Spacing ensures optimal canopy spread. This principle aligns with modern orchard management. Perhaps most importantly, the text reflects ecological thinking. Plants are not isolated organisms. They interact with soil, water, insects, animals, and climate. The classification system integrates environment into taxonomy. Plants suitable for dry regions are distinguished from those requiring heavy rainfall. Seasonal flowering patterns are documented carefully. Ancient scholars recognized phenology, the study of seasonal biological events. Flowering times indicate climatic shifts. Pollination cycles depend on insect presence. Although ancient texts do not describe pollination biology in modern terms, they recognized relationships between flowering and fruit set. The Vrikshayurveda also emphasizes tree health as a moral responsibility. Planting trees was seen as a virtuous act. Maintaining orchards ensured food security and ecological stability. This ethical framing reinforced sustainable practice. Modern botanical classification, developed during the Enlightenment, relies heavily on reproductive structures and genetic analysis. Ancient classification relied on morphology and practical use. Yet both systems aim to organize plant diversity systematically. The ancient approach prioritized functionality and ecological adaptation. In Part 2, we will examine how the Vrikshayurveda compares to modern Linnaean taxonomy, analyze plant health treatments described in the text, explore early ecological awareness embedded in classification systems, and evaluate how ancient botanical science can inform sustainable landscaping and reforestation efforts today. The roots of botany do not belong to one civilization. They grew in many soils. And among those soils was the intellectual ground of ancient India. To fully appreciate the sophistication of the Vrikshayurveda, we must compare its botanical logic with modern classification systems. Modern botany, especially after Carl Linnaeus in the 18th century, classifies plants primarily by reproductive structures, flower morphology, seed formation, and genetic relationships. Ancient Indian botanical classification did not use genetic analysis, yet it demonstrated systematic organization based on structure, life cycle, habitat, and utility. Plants were grouped into categories such as trees, shrubs, creepers, climbers, aquatic plants, and seasonal herbs. This morphological classification mirrors the first layer of modern taxonomy, growth habit. Growth habit remains one of the most practical descriptors in agriculture and ecology. The Vrikshayurveda also distinguishes between fruit-bearing and non-fruit-bearing species, annual versus perennial plants, and flowering versus non-flowering varieties. These distinctions remain fundamental in agricultural planning today. Another remarkable feature is plant health diagnostics. The text describes symptoms such as yellowing leaves, premature fruit drop, bark cracking, and root weakness. Rather than attributing these solely to supernatural causes, the text prescribes targeted remedies. Organic formulations were prepared from botanical extracts, fermented mixtures, mineral additives, and animal byproducts. For example, mixtures derived from neem leaves were recommended for pest control. Modern research confirms neem contains azadirachtin, a natural insect growth regulator. This suggests that empirical observation identified plant-based solutions long before chemical pesticides. The text also describes nutrient supplementation techniques. Soil enriched with organic compost improves fruiting capacity. Plants deprived of nutrients show visible stress signs. Modern plant physiology explains that nitrogen deficiency causes chlorosis. Phosphorus deficiency affects root development. While ancient texts did not describe nitrogen chemically, they observed plant response to soil enrichment. Propagation methods are described in surprising detail. Grafting, known today as vegetative propagation, was practiced skillfully. The technique involves attaching a scion of one plant onto the rootstock of another. This requires compatibility between vascular tissues to allow nutrient flow. Successful grafting demands precise cuts and alignment. The Ayurveda describes ideal seasons for grafting to ensure survival. This reflects awareness of plant dormancy cycles. Modern horticulture continues to follow seasonal grafting windows. The ecological awareness embedded in the text is equally impressive. Certain trees were recommended for planting near water bodies to prevent soil erosion. Others were suited for dry landscapes. This suggests early understanding of environmental adaptation. Tree planting was not random beautification. It was strategic ecological management. The text also discusses spacing in orchards. Trees planted too close compete for sunlight and nutrients. Trees planted too far waste space. Optimal spacing maximizes productivity. This is a principle still central in commercial orchard design. Another fascinating aspect is phenological observation. Flowering and fruiting times were documented carefully. This allowed farmers to anticipate harvest cycles and market timing. Modern climate science uses phenology as a sensitive indicator of climate change. Ancient observers were already tracking these patterns. The integration of botanical knowledge with ethical responsibility is also significant. Planting trees was considered an act of merit. The preservation of groves had social value. Sacred groves functioned as biodiversity reserves. Modern conservation biology recognizes that such preserved ecosystems maintain genetic diversity and ecological balance. The Ayurveda reflects an understanding that plant life underpins human survival. Soil fertility determines food supply. Tree cover influences rainfall patterns. Biodiversity reduces pest outbreaks. Although expressed in pre-modern terminology, these insights align with contemporary ecological science. Comparing ancient classification to Linnaean taxonomy reveals differences in framework but similarities in intent. Modern taxonomy seeks universal biological hierarchy based on shared ancestry. Ancient classification focused on utility, morphology, and environmental adaptation. Both systems represent attempts to bring order to biodiversity. One difference lies in reductionism. Modern botany isolates species genetically. Ancient botany emphasized interdependence. Plants were described in relation to soil, climate, and neighboring species. This relational thinking resembles modern systems ecology. As global agriculture confronts monoculture risks, soil degradation, and biodiversity collapse, relational classification regains relevance. Reforestation efforts today require knowledge of native species adaptation. Ancient texts often recommended indigenous species suited to local climate. Introducing non-native species can disrupt ecological balance. The Ayurveda implicitly understood this through habitat-based categorization. Modern environmental planning increasingly emphasizes native species restoration. Rediscovery of ancient botanical knowledge does not mean abandoning genetic science. It means integrating long-term ecological observation with modern research. Ancient classification systems were built on patient field study. They were practical, not abstract. They emerged from farmers, gardeners, and scholars who lived close to the land. The legacy of Ayurveda demonstrates that systematic botanical thinking existed far earlier than commonly acknowledged. It also reminds us that classification is not merely intellectual exercise. It guides cultivation, conservation, and sustainability. Plants sustain food chains. They regulate climate. They stabilize soil. They shape ecosystems. Ancient Indian botanical science recognized this interconnectedness. Modern science confirms it. The roots of botany stretch deep into history. And among those roots lies a tradition that saw plants not just as resources, but as living participants in ecological harmony. The Ayurveda is not merely an old manuscript. It is a reminder that sustainable knowledge has long existed. We are not inventing ecological awareness. We are rediscovering it.